Hello there, folks. Today I'd like to make a tune together with you, and in the process, I will try to share some of the music theory tools that I use to create my own music. And I will try to simplify it all to the state of just simple instructions that you can go step by step in order to create your own music. So let's go. First, we go into the track settings and select ourselves tempo and a scale. If you're new to music making process, then I highly recommend you sticking with major or minor scale. Major will sound happy and minor will sound sad. Uh, Tempo, once again, if you're new, I recommend you picking somewhere between 70 beats per minute and 90, maybe 100. The slower the tempo, the easier it will be to play along. So for myself, I will pick something around, let's say 90 beats per minute. Doesn't have to be exact. There are many places where you can start building your song. It could be a drum loop, it could be a melody, it could be lyrics. Those are all valid places, and you may pick whatever fits your heart content. But today I'd like to start with a chord progression. And what is a chord progression? In order to answer that question, we first need to understand what is a chord. And a chord is just multiple notes played at the same time. Before we start building our chord progression, I'd like to point out that I will be using numbers in order to indicate which notes we need to press. Right in the middle of our board, there is a white line which indicates the root of our scale, and I will be calling this root and number 1. So this bottom row, we'll be using mainly this for creating our music. Right in the middle, bottom, there's a number 1. To the right of it, we will be using numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And to the left of it, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 once again. In order to build our chord progression, we will need 4 numbers between 1 and 6. So, for example, let's pick 6, 2, 5, 4. And we will need to find those numbers on our board and try to play them. So we find number 1, then we count 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here will be the first note that we will be playing. 6, 2, 5, 4. Right? So before we start creating, I highly suggest you picking yourself a looper, a drum pack, then setting the tempo sync on your looper to 1/4, picking any drum that you like, hitting your looper once, then hitting a drum, and hitting looper once again straight away. That will create a metronome that will help us stay on the beat. We can make it a little bit quieter and close our drum rack. So let's get back to our board. Let's try to remember our number sequence. In my case, that was 6, 2, 5, 4. We will bring the head of our looper closer so it's easier to hit it. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna count along to our metronome, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And every time we say 1, we're gonna play one of our notes from the sequence. So let's hit the looper and start playing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is obviously not a chord progression, we are just playing one note at a time. In order to complete our chord progression, we will need to play some more notes on top of this recording. So let's find the other 2 notes that we need to add to this chord progression. If we were playing the number 6, we will need to pick the notes that are one to the right, one up, and then we go to the right ones and down ones. And that will make a little triangle. Then I played number 2. Once again, I go up and right and down. Make another triangle. Then I played number 5. Then I played number 4. Since we have one of the notes already recorded in loop, we just need to add the other 2. Let's go and record those. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we have our chord progression. Let's keep building on top of it. Next, I suggest you add a bass line. To keep it really simple, we will just repeat our sequence of numbers, just with another instrument that is shifted 1 octave down. And then just let's repeat our sequence of 6, 2, 5, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we have a bass line. Obviously not really interesting, but for now it will do. Next, let's go and add a melody on top of it. Instead of playing just the root note of each chord, 6, 2, 5, 4, we're gonna use all of the notes inside of each chord. Let's change the tempo sync to 1/8, pick some other instrument and shift it 1 octave up. And we will just play notes in this chord randomly. You can pick whatever you want, and you can play in whatever tempo you like. Let's try to record that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again, really simple, but it works. Next up, we have our drums, and let's go and try to create some kind of the drum loop. We will mute our metronome, and we will make basically another metronome, but this time out of the bass drum. Then I gonna select the tempo sync of 1/8 and add hi-hats in between each of the bass drums. Then I gonna select tempo sync of 1/4 once again, and on the every second hit of our bass drum, I gonna add a snare on top. And that's it. Pretty simple drum loop, but it works. So, if we're gonna keep building, we probably want to make another chord progression. So let's mute everything except the root notes of our chord progression and pick another 4 numbers between 1 and 6. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna pick the instrument that we used for the chord progression, set it to 0, count along, and record our new chord progression. 1, 3, 3, 4. Then we're gonna mute our previous chord progression and start working with a new one. Add 2 notes on top. Then add a bass line. And add a melody. And then we can switch between those two groups. And then build more groups on top, switch between them, and there you have a full track. Obviously, playing just on the triads is really primitive, and you won't be able to make really interesting music with it. So in order to make it more interesting, we can do following things. When making a chord progression, instead of playing just the notes that are inside the triad, we can play actually any other shape that you like, that you enjoy listening to. You can try a chord like this. You can add multiple notes to it. There are a few shapes that work really well, usually. The first one, the most stable one, is obviously a triad that I just showed you. Then you can, for example, do an inversion of a triad, and that will mean moving one of the notes in the triad somewhere else. For example, or. Then you can use rhythmic patterns to make it more interesting. Instead of keeping the chord for 4 beats straight, you can play something like. Then another thing that you can do is add a arpeggiator to it. Then another thing that you can do is not keep each chord for straight 4 beats. You can, for example, do 2-2, then 4. For example, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can basically break the rules, but try to keep it structured. Try to maintain some sort of pattern throughout your music. Our brains love to find patterns in everything. Break the rules. Make your own rules. Let's try to build a new beat for ourselves on top of the drum loop that we already have. And we will use all of the stuff that I told you about the chord progression. One more thing, it's called syncopation, and it basically means that you're gonna play the chord a little bit too early in your chord progression. For example, if we were playing straight on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, we can play, for example, one of the chords instead of straight on the 4, we can play it on the 3.5 or 3 3/4. I'm gonna play 4 chords in a row, and the third one will be syncopated. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 4. You saw I tried to play it a little bit too early. Kinda hard to keep the count going, but practice makes it perfect. So let's try to fiddle around with the keyboard a little bit and find ourselves a nice sounding chord progression with all of those rules that I said. here will be our chord progression. Then we will try to add a bass line. When building a bass line, I just usually enable my chord progression and try to use different notes and keep them for the duration of each chord. And here's a interesting sequence that I came up with. In order to make it even more interesting, we can use a 70-30 rule, which states that when making a bass line, try to stick 70% on the note that is the root of your chord, or in my case, a note that I just chose for my sequence, and 30% of the time, try to go elsewhere. And we will make it a little bit longer, so it takes more than 4 bars, just to give some variety to our tune. Let's get to building a melody. Here we once again will try to stick with the triads that we used, but we will play some other notes that are around the triad. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to pick what exactly notes do you want to play. So here I came up with a simple rule that you can use, and that is to try to build some Tetris blocks around the triad that you have. Let's say, for example, we have this chord playing in our chord progression right now, and we can build a Tetris block that goes like this. And the last note gonna be right here, or we can pick a Tetris block that goes or like this, or a L shape, or the other way, or this. So since we're playing those notes, then we have to end on one of those. Go ahead, try different stuff, try ending on different notes. And yeah, we're gonna get back to our chord progression and try to build Tetris blocks around it and try to end on one of the notes that is inside a chord progression. I broke the rules a little bit, but it works. So the last thing that we're gonna spice up today is our drum loop. I usually, when trying to come up with a drum loop, I just beatbox myself something. For example, yeah, I beatbox, I keep beatboxing the thing that I like, and then try to replicate it with drums. I'm probably making it look a little bit too easy, but it comes with practice. One other thing that I have for you stored in my tips list is, for example, when we have a drum loop where the hi-hats go. Every 16 beat we have a hi-hat. Instead of recording it like we can add a little bit of swing to it by doing the first hit with a full force, then adding a little less force on the second one, and then the third one even less force. And then it has this swingy feeling to it. As you can see, the first heavy swing of our hi-hat doesn't align with the drum loop that we have already, but it still sounds good. Another thing that I like to do when I cannot come up with a good drum sequence, I usually grab myself a bunch of different drums. Doesn't really matter which are which, and then I just randomly smash them. And record a really short loop. And sometimes it comes out as a really nice drum loop. So, in the end of this tutorial, I would like to record another section and use a tape recorder to make a full song out of it. Let's go. So let's grab ourselves a tape recorder and start enabling loops one by one. And I will try to commentate on what I do, but you will be probably able to see what I do just by itself. Try to mix in some sounds, then turn them off, give some free space, give some rest, and the main aim for this exercise we will have is to change the intensity of the song over time. Let's go. Let it play for one more loop so listener is familiar. Then let's try to add drums. Okay, I failed. That happens. That happens actually a lot. So we will go again. 3, 1, 2, 3, and go. Switch to the previous group. So the switcheroo between those is a little bit not consistent, just because we don't occupy the same musical space. It's a little bit messy, but we can live with that. And for the outro, let's just fade it away slowly. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be an example of what you can do to give people some tools to use in their music making process. So thank you everyone for watching. Hope you learned something new, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.